Hey everybody, I've got such a cool video for you today because this is one of my favorite cars of all time, probably the best engineered automobile of all time. I'm just going to say it right now, the Mercedes-Benz W123. And in this video, I'm going to prove my point because this car has over 250,000 miles on it, and it really is just getting broken in. Now, I'm really excited to say that you can own this very car you're seeing right now over at TFLbids.com, and the owner really wants to see this car end up in the hands of someone who loves these W123s, someone who's going to keep this car on the road for a long time. And if you want an affordable classic to serve you for many, many, many years to come, it just doesn't get much better. These cars are new enough to be very drivable every day. They're old enough to feel special. You're not seeing a whole ton of them on the road anymore. And this is a great car, not only to look at, but to drive and to own on a daily basis. Now, Brendan, why don't you come to the rear of this car and we'll talk a little bit about the history. These cars are something truly special. Now, they were very popular here in the States, but they were even more popular abroad. They were sold in Western Europe, they were sold in Eastern Europe, and eventually they made their way down to the African continent. And you see a lot of these as taxi cabs through much of North Africa. Even today, in 2022, these are still being used in Morocco as taxi cabs. But not this particular one, because there were tons of engine options ranging from the tiny 200 diesel with like 50 horsepower all the way up to this one. This is the 1984 300D turbo diesel. So it's a very late W123, which is kind of the one you want. They figured out a lot of the issues. And let's talk about that engine. So why don't you hop around the front, Brendan, and we'll take a look at that magnificent turbo diesel. Now, in the States, depending on the year, you could get these in both gasoline or diesel models, but by 1984, it was diesel options only. And when you pop the hood, you're gonna find, oh, didn't pop it strong enough. Gotta give it a real pull. There we go. Now let's pop open this magnificent grille and check out the engine. So that is an OM617 turbo diesel. Inline 5-cylinder, so a 5-cylinder turbo diesel, and that right there is what makes these things so unkillable. That's a mechanical injection pump. So modern day diesels are electronically controlled, and the little burst of diesel that makes it into the combustion chamber is dictated by a computer and by all sorts of solenoids. Not with this car. This thing is entirely mechanical. And one of the cool things about this is you can have the engine running, unplug the alternator, you could remove the alternator belt altogether, and it'll keep going. They just require no electricity to actually operate, which is just fantastic. Now, the great thing about having the OM617 versus the 240D, which is an OM616, is that the 617 had the turbo. And that makes a really big difference. So we live up here in Colorado, 5,000 feet above sea level, and it makes this car so much more drivable. I think that the 240D had like 69 horsepower, somewhere in that territory. For a full-size luxury sedan, it just wasn't enough. This was pushing closer to like 100, 120 horsepower, which makes it way better at altitude. Now, as you can see, it's actually a pretty clean engine, and it started right up when I gave it a crank. So listen to the way this engine runs. Now, of course, these have glow plugs, so you stick the key in the ignition, and you gotta let them glow. Give it a little bit of time. That's kind of heating everything up, and then after a few seconds, they crank into life. Now, these engines are very mechanical sounding, and they almost sound like tractors, but check this out. So 250,000 miles on it, and look, very little blow by. Some of these engines, you go to start them up, and that oil cap goes shooting off into the distance, but this engine, at least on the blow by test, seems to be pretty healthy. Yeah, love that. Really sounds good. And you see this little button right here, Brendan, that says stop? You see that? So these cars have an extremely intricate vacuum system that control everything from where the air goes in the climate vents to the door locks to the cruise control even. And in the event of a vacuum failure, there's no way to turn the engine off because it's a fuel shut-off mechanism. So you push that little red stop button, and that's how you turn the engine off. But I want to show you something cool. Now, I had a really nice W123. I was really proud of it, spent a ton of money on it, but I could never get the vacuum lock situation perfect because they're pretty complicated. Now, the way it's supposed to work is the engine builds up vacuum based off a vacuum pump, and then it's stored in like this little canister. And then when you go to lock the car, all 4 door locks glide down. But the thing is, mine would kind of do that once and then lose vacuum, and then I come back the next day and I have to wait for the vacuum to build up. But on this one, check this out. Unlock it, and they all pop back up. And when I came up to this car, I've been sitting for over a day and it still worked. And the owner says that you can let it sit for quite a bit of time and those will still work. Now, I want to talk about this color. Most of these that you see now on the road are going to be like white or beige or white. And sometimes you see a beige one. This is a really cool color. The color code on this was 932, which is lapis blue. And I just love seeing these 123s in an unusual color. And this one is held up pretty well. So there are like a little bit of areas of pitting and stuff, but like rust was a pretty big issue, and they typically rust really viciously around the rear fenders. They often rust viciously back here on the rear apron. Even on the trunk lids, you'll see a lot of them there. Base of the doors. This one appears to be in nice shape, and I think with a little bit of love, a little bit of polish, you can get this thing looking really, really good. Now check out these wheels. The wheels are a little bit pitted and they're a little bit rusty, but that's pretty common. 14-inch wheels, pretty easy to refinish them, and the tires seem to be in pretty good shape. All right, hop on that side. Let's check out the inside, because this is pretty neat as well. Now, these cars are available in 2 different seat configurations. There was a leather interior, and then there was this, which is called MB Tex, and this stuff could survive a nuclear blast. It would be cockroaches and MB Tex. That would be the only thing left to tell the story. Even with 250-some thousand miles, they still look like they are a couple of years old. This car is nearly 40 years old. Now, this car does suffer from some issues on the inside. So like we're missing some wood trim here. Same thing in the middle. This little cup holder bracket is not original. But like the dash, a little dusty, a little dirty, but it's not cracked to heck, which is very unusual for a 123 Mercedes. Headliner also looks really, really good. Steering wheel missing a few of its little bumps. It does have 250-some thousand miles. Starting to show some wear. Now the owner says that the odometer started kind of becoming intermittent about 3 months ago. So that 253,000 may be a little bit off according to the owner. But check this out, like it has its original Grand Prix Deca radio with the cassette player, which works. The climate control, he said the AC is a little weak, but climate control, the buttons seem to pop in and out like they should. Does it have a horn? Let's see. Ignition works well. Oh, of course the horn works. Now the gauges are very cool, easy to read, super functional. You want to kind of pan your camera in here? I can show these off a little bit. So we got temperature in Celsius, we got fuel, that works. Oil pressure works, speedometer up to 120 miles an hour, very optimistic. And then the tach doesn't work, very common Mercedes issue, which mine had as well. But overall, it's held up pretty well in here. And part of the reason that happened is because just how simple these cars were. So if you look back even to like the mid-1980s, Cadillac was offering full power seats, right? And all sorts of crazy buttons and gadgets and gizmos and all these crazy features. Mercedes did offer, you know, automatic climate control and a good radio, but like it has manual side mirrors, right? Which is pretty rudimentary for back in the day, at least a manual driver mirror. But all that meant is that all these years later, it still looks good. A couple other things to point out. Glass is really, really good. It's got the rear defroster in there. And then if you poke underneath there, like you can see, oftentimes water collects in that spare well, and then those end up pretty rusty. Apart from mechanical issues, the owner does tell me there's a little bit of an oil leak underneath, and it does appear to be pretty wet. It is a 40-year-old car, but I think it's time we take it for a spin and see how it drives. All right, Jim, thanks for letting me drive your 123 and for selling it at TFL Bids. So talk to me about your ownership of this car. How long have you had it?
Well, I've had it about 12 years, well, 11 years, I guess. I bought it in 2011 from the person who had owned it before me was only the second owner, and it's just been such a beautiful car to drive. It's been a love affair the whole time, and I drove it in Oregon, and I'm retired now, so I don't get to drive it as much as I'd like to. I've got a couple other vehicles that I also need to drive, but I really wanted to go to a home where somebody's gonna, you know, give it the tender loving care that it deserves, because it's been such a wonderful car.
So did you buy this vehicle in Oregon?
I did. I bought it in Portland. And, like I said, the owner was that I bought it from was only the second owner of the vehicle.
Now, it's a little bit of a cliche, but it's absolutely true. These vehicles do drive like bank vaults.
Yes.
They are just incredibly solid on the road. Now, they are not to be rushed, so they kind of just go at the one speed they like to go at. But if you're comfortable cruising on the highway at 65, maybe 70, they will just go for 1,000 miles with seemingly no problem.
Right.
Has this one ever left you stranded? Any overheating issues?
Never.
That's great. And I can tell you're driving it right now, like that was a downshift. A little bit of power. The turbo kicks in pretty good. The 1 to 2 shift is pretty firm. Mine was the same way actually, and I spent a lot of money trying to fix it, and it was still firm. So I've heard that as a common thing from owners. But apart from that, like the steering is really good. You would never have guessed that this is a car with 253,000 miles from the way it drives. 100%. Now, this is not your first one you've owned, right? You've had another one.
I did have another one. Unfortunately, it fell victim to somebody hitting it when it was parked on the side of the road or on the curb of my house, and somebody came by recklessly and did some significant damage to it. So,
shoot.
I had the opportunity to pick this one up, and the color, I fell in love with the color, because I've looked at several different ones. So.
Very rare color. I've
Yeah.
never actually seen one in this lapis blue, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And what I love about these is they are old enough where it feels like something special. You got the enormous Mercedes steering wheel. You got the kind of the clatter of the diesel engine, the 3-pointed star at the edge of the hood. But then at the same time, you also have like modern seat belts, and headrests and real brakes. So they drive a lot more modern than some of their older predecessors. I'm actually going to go right here. We'll make a big loop.
Sure.
I really appreciate you letting us do this video today. This was a ton of fun, and I really hope to find us a good home. So if you're interested, check the link in the description below. It's over at TFL Bids, and happy bidding, because this is a really fun car. And I think it'll, one of our viewers out there, I know we got a lot of Mercedes fans, this will go to a really good home.